What's up, guys? It's Rico here, CEO of Source Asia, host of the Made in China podcast, and the host of the Source Asia YouTube channel, of course. Back with another one. My last video in Jakarta, just final thoughts on living in Jakarta and Southeast Asia as a whole. So I'm hanging out on my rooftop swimming pool, Park Royale. There's two pools. One has like a little whirlpool over here, and then there's a longer one behind me. This one is the best position for lighting. It's like 5 p.m. here. I don't know how much time I have. It's a little bit cloudy as well, but you know, should be able to make it work. So yeah, I've been here for a month. Part of the reason why I came down was obviously Chinese New Year. I've been, at this stage, I've been to China, I've been to Hong Kong, I've been to Thailand, I've been to the Philippines, multiple places in the Philippines, multiple places in Thailand, multiple places all over China, and I'm just talking about Asia. So I kind of wanted to expand a little bit. I've got places like Vietnam on my radar, Cambodia and things like that. But Indonesia is a place that not that many of my friends talk about or have visited before. And then Bali is like one of these world famous digital nomad hubs. I think Bali's heyday is over. It's a little bit different, but that's a whole other story. So yeah, that's the reason why I decided to come down, and I wanted to spend the majority of my time in Jakarta because one of my friends, Leonie, who's been on the podcast before, she was really adamant that I check out Jakarta. She's like, this is your vibe. It's a big city. You can wear your suits. You can go to your lounges. Co-working spaces. All that stuff. Actually, there's a WeWork tower just across from the building over here. So I was like, all right, I'll go check it out for a couple weeks. My initial impressions, I think I already did a video about that, but my initial impressions were just how similar it reminded me of Thailand, some Thai vibes in the architecture and a little bit of the language, the food as well to a certain extent. Since that time period, I think I've learned that the influences here are, Indian, Arabic, Chinese, then of course the indigenous Indonesian culture, which I'm still learning about. But so you have all those influences, and it comes out in the food, it comes out in the language, it comes out in the culture, and it also comes out in the architecture. So when I say Thailand, maybe what I mean is the Southeast Asian, for lack of a better term, Polynesian sort of architecture and also there's a fucking Buddhist influence here. Before Islam came in, I think Buddhism was the prevalent religion. So the influence that China has here is interesting because I think the population of Chinese Indonesian people is 5% or 10% of the population of the entire country, but they seem to be the wealthiest population in the country, and they seem to have a heavy influence on the food. They seem to have a heavy influence on a lot of even when I was going out, for example, my friend says Chindo, Chinese Indonesian spots, were the high-end places. Those were the go-to places, you know what I mean? And when I was there, it was the younger generation of Chinese Indonesian people just spending, their parents' money, generational wealth, balling out, man. Because it's not cheap. Indonesia is cheap for a lot of different things, the accommodation. If you're gonna eat sort of local foods or eat at some of the lower end or mid-tier restaurants, you can easily get I found one dope salad spot that delivers to me, and I was getting Caesar salads for $4, and they're decently sized. But if you want to eat out at the high-end restaurants, one restaurant that I always go to in Guangzhou is called Mikasa. So if you want to go to a Mikasa type restaurant, Mikasa a meal there, if you were going to like get the fucking high, like a crazy steak, then yeah, you end up paying like $20, $30. But if you're just getting like a decent sized meal at Mikasa, it's like $10 to maybe $15 a meal. Whereas here, you're talking 15, 20 plus a meal at some of those spots. It's not cheap when it comes to that kind of stuff. And of course, there's 100% tax on alcohol because this is an Islamic country. Because of the tax on alcohol, if you're getting a shot of Grey Goose or a shot of Absolute, whatever, it's anywhere between $6 to $10 a shot. And if you go to some of the high-end places, you could end up paying $14, $15 a drink. So we're talking now like New York type, Hong Kong type pricing just for alcohol specifically. So it's not a cheap city if you want to go out or if you like to, have the occasional drink. So in that sense, like that's been an interesting discovery. As I was saying, like the influence of the Chinese culture is very felt, even though the population is not large. In terms of the business climate, I think that because of the language barrier and maybe some of the cultural aspects, it would take you longer in a place like Jakarta to get integrated and to sort of make those connections. I feel like this is the kind of city where if you know people and you invest time, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential for success, like with most Southeast Asian countries. But it is also a very established city. I think that's one of the things that I've felt about being here is just like, it's established. Like this is an older city. A lot of cities in Asia are, but like in Guangzhou is one of the oldest cities in the world, but there's a newness to it because it's been completely overhauled from a technological and architectural standpoint, and construction standpoint. Like the Guangzhou skyline looks so different now than it did 10, 15 years ago. I don't think that would be the case with Jakarta. I think if you looked at Jakarta 10 years ago, it would look fairly similar to how it looks right now. And I think when you're in places where things are established and kind of the same, as a foreigner coming in, it's more difficult to break into the business market, if that makes sense. The other aspect is when I say language barrier, it's definitely not as bad as China. Like a lot of people here speak English. I've made great friends since I've been here, local people. When I go out to restaurants, when I go to bars, or when I go to coffee shops and stuff like that, I don't have any issues, communicating for the most part. It's not like everybody you can have like a deep conversation with or anything like that, but the day-to-day stuff that I would struggle with in China when I first got to China definitely isn't as prevalent here. But that being said, if I'm comparing it to a place like the Philippines, it's a big difference, man. It's a very big difference. Like the average person in the Philippines, I'm able to have a semi-deep conversation with just because they speak English. Or when you walk into a coffee shop, having that extra bit of communication, being able to communicate with a driver and when you're in a car and sort of give them in-depth instructions as to where to go. And I think because of that aspect, the language in the Philippines English is so prevalent, it makes it easier for somebody to come in as a foreigner and then, make friends with locals, get integrated into local customs, local culture. Those are the advantages of being in a place like that. So I think with Jakarta, it's one of those places that would take time to get integrated. But I would say, yeah, I would definitely come back here. Like I like the people. People are friendly. Maybe a little bit more timid than people in the Philippines. I think people in the Philippines are more outgoing and maybe a little bit more social in the Philippines than in Indonesia. In Indonesia, I get the sense that, again, because of that thing when I'm talking about being such an established city, in Jakarta I'm talking specifically, I get the sense of people sort of sticking to their crews a little bit more here. Whereas like I feel like in Manila, there's a group of people that are like established friends. They're more likely to invite a new person just because they want that new dynamic, and then recognizing that you're a foreigner in the country, they kind of want to make sure that you're enjoying yourself, make sure that you're comfortable and stuff like that. So those are the major differences. I feel like in my last video, there's something that I wanted to talk about specifically that I didn't touch on. I'm trying to rack my brain. So I've talked about food, I've talked about the import laws, sourcing. I might have spoken about sourcing in the last video, but I could still talk about that. The apps, Grab, Gojek. I think that was more about Bali than it was about Jakarta. But one thing I wanted to mention just quickly, I think I forgot to mention in my video about Bali. In Bali, you have to be a little bit careful as a foreigner, like moving around, in the sense of like you will get taken advantage of in certain situations. And I understand that it's an island, they're trying to make money from tourists, and they also know that tourists coming from foreign countries, you know, a taxi might be $15 or $10 in your home country, and then here they're charging you $7, and you're like, oh, this is really cheap. But in reality, they should be charging you $3 or $4. So there's those kind of things you have to look out for. One of the big things that kind of I didn't like, which happened, you have like certain subdivisions in Bali, and most of these subdivisions tend to be where the beaches are, and also tend to be where all the sort of bars, nightclubs, restaurants are, close to the beach. The subdivision is literally just like a tiny road that goes down, and then, you know, there'll be bars, maybe a resort here, a resort there, and the beach is kind of at the end, and then, you know, there'll usually be some beach bars as well. Once you enter that subdivision, it's essentially impossible to get a regular taxi. When I say regular taxi, I'm talking metered taxis. So Bluebird, Silverbird are the metered taxis. And then if you want to take something like an Uber, which would be Grab or Gojek, you can take an Uber there, you can take a metered taxi to the location and they'll drop you off. But if you want to call one, like they literally have like these, I want to call it the fucking taxi mafia. They really have a taxi mafia that just stands around paying attention to see if there are cars driving around that area that have foreigners inside the cars that they don't recognize. So I got stopped 2 times trying to get a Grab, in the Grab, like I was physically in the Grab. And then they'll just have some dude who stop the car and be like, you can't take the Grab here. This subdivision doesn't allow Grabs, you have to take a taxi. And then the taxi was literally like 2 times the price. Like it's a taxi that they have. So there's a specific taxi stand that is run by this local taxi mafia, and the taxis cost 2 times the price. So just be aware of that. That happened, a couple times, and I was like, and it's in different subdivisions, not just one subdivision. It's like pretty much all of the subdivisions that are like close to the beach, that are in sort of prime locations where they know that there's high traffic for foreigners, especially at night when you're going out and you're having especially the bars, streets at night. Just wanted to touch on that quickly. From the sourcing manufacturing side, I think I talked about that in my previous video. It's the number one issue when you think about sourcing and manufacturing outside of China is just there is no consolidated database of suppliers. Like there just isn't. So it's difficult to find those factories. And then if you're talking about a place like Indonesia, from my understanding, the factories are spread out and they're also in remote areas. So you really need to know people. Even the people that are here, locals that are looking for factories, struggle to find factories themselves. It's not the best place for the sourcing side of things. I'm sure that will change in the future, and in the markets that I went to are all selling stuff imported, OEM products from China. They don't do any customization, original design. If you want to come to markets here, you might as well just go to the markets in China because it's going to be cheaper, probably have more options. And the markets in China, the people can actually do ODM stuff as well. So that's a little bit more of an advantage on that side. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like that's me signing off from Jakarta. I really enjoyed my stay here. Definitely will be back. I just don't know when that's going to be because I'm in the process of moving to the Philippines. So that's like my main priority. And it's not like Jakarta is just like a 1-hour flight. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more prohibitive to come down here, but would definitely love to come down again in the near future and maybe stay for a month again or 2 months. You know, the climate of Airbnbs here is pretty good. Like I said, accommodation is really, really inexpensive. So like the place I'm staying in is really nice. Like it's like almost unnecessarily large and nice for me, but it was within my budget. If I wanted to go down $10, $15 a night, I could still get a very nice place that would just be smaller. And if you're talking about long-term stays, like it makes it really inexpensive. So the amount of money that you might spend on food and drinks kind of gets offset by your accommodation. And if you're living here full-time, you just get a maid and, you know, a chef, and it's not going to be that expensive, like $50 a month, $100 a month, and you have somebody cooking you meals every day. So that's it. All right, so I'm signing off. It's getting dark. I hope you guys like this kind of content. If you like it, like, comment, share, subscribe. Drop me any questions in the comment section, questions about Indonesia, Southeast Asia. What's your favorite country in Southeast Asia? Let me know in the comment section below.